Welcome to Revisit Books podcast, where we turn books into bite-sized wisdom you can use every day. Today, we are opening up a behavioral exploration that has, well, it's kind of provided a new language for frustration, pretty much all over the globe. We're focusing on Thomas Erikson's huge bestseller, Surrounded by Idiots. Now, if that title makes you maybe chuckle a bit because you felt that way recently, then you are exactly the audience this whole framework was built for.
It is an incredibly provocative title, isn't it? It's definitely designed to grab your attention.
Oh, yeah.
And then almost immediately it challenges your whole perspective. This exploration, look, it isn't just surface level advice. It's more like a detailed guide. It uses the universally recognized DASC behavioral model.
Why DISC?
Yeah. And Erikson, he takes this pretty complex psychological framework, which, I mean, it's been around for decades, and he sort of translates it into this simple, actionable, almost like a decoder ring.
A decoder ring. I like that.
It helps us understand the 4 major personality types and, crucially, why the people who maybe confuse us or frustrate us, why they operate so completely differently.
And the author, Thomas Erikson, he really brings some significant weight to this conversation, doesn't he? He's a Swedish behavioral expert, an active lecturer too, who really specializes in this specific area, taking these dense, often academic, psychological ideas and turning them into these captivating, easy-to-digest formats that people can actually use, like immediately.
And what's fascinating here is just the sheer speed and reach of his work. Erikson's expertise isn't just theoretical, you know?
Right.
It's really rooted in practical application through this DISC model. The book's been translated into, what, well over 40 languages?
Wow.
Which, if you kind of step back and look at the bigger picture, it really confirms one thing. This pain point of misunderstanding, that friction between different personalities, it's just a universal human struggle. Doesn't matter if you're in Stockholm, Sydney, or Seattle.
Yeah, it's everywhere. So why should we invest time in understanding this way of classifying people? I mean, it's more than just interesting trivia, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's really an essential roadmap for managing relationships, for managing professional outcomes better.
Okay.
It helps you move past that initial, almost knee-jerk judgment, that feeling that the other person is just fundamentally flawed or, well, an idiot.
Right, the table.
Exactly. And it gives you the tools to actually adjust your own approach.
Yeah.
Which, you know, leads to improved effectiveness and ideally less conflict.
Okay. So let's talk directly to you, the listener, for just a second. Who really gets the most out of this exploration? I think it's fundamentally for anyone who's ever felt like they were speaking a completely different language than, say, their colleague or their manager, maybe even their partner.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
This is for the person who's maybe looking for quick but still thorough knowledge about human interaction. Someone who needs to shift from feeling constantly bewildered to feeling strategically informed. It's really built for that aha moment seeker. You know, think about those situations. Why does your high-energy yellow colleague always seem to wander off topic in important meetings?
Oh, yes.
Or why does your blue manager insist on like 3 separate drafts of every single email?
Oh, I know that one.
Yeah. The book gives clarity on these really common frustrations. It helps turn personality differences from just obstacles into something manageable, into variables you can work with.
And the practical application, it seems to cut across basically all parts of life. We're talking managers trying to motivate teams with different personalities.
Yeah.
Right? Employees trying to pitch ideas effectively.
Entrepreneurs trying to close sales.
Parents trying to figure out their kids' learning style, maybe, or coaches guiding performance.
Exactly. If achieving your goals relies, even a little bit, on interacting effectively with other human beings, then this material is pretty vital.
Okay.
And that really gets to the heart of Erikson's mission. He wants to promote a method, a way of classifying observed behavior.
Okay, observed behavior.
Yeah, not like deep psychoanalysis, but what you actually see so that we can maybe preemptively reduce conflicts and misunderstandings. It's about creating empathy, really, through a degree of predictability. If you can sort of anticipate how someone might react based on their dominant color, you can then choose a communication strategy that avoids unnecessary friction.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Before we dive into the actual colors, the reds, yellows, greens, blues, the whole system rests on a few core ideas about human interaction, right?
That's right.
What's like the single most important rule Erikson lays down about communication?
Well, the foundation, the absolute bedrock of the entire approach is this. Communication is on the listener's terms.
On the listener's terms. Okay.
It sounds simple, almost obvious, but we violate this rule constantly. We assume that if we send a clear, logical, concise message, it's automatically going to be received that way.
Yeah, you think, I was perfectly clear.
Exactly. What's their problem? But the reality is the message that actually gets received is profoundly shaped by the listener's pre-existing framework.
Because that framework, the listener's internal world, their history, their biases, it acts like a filtering system.
Precisely. They filter your words through their biases, their past experiences, their current emotional state, all of it. So if you're speaking really efficiently, like a red might, to someone who really prioritizes emotional connection, maybe like a yellow, they probably won't hear the efficiency. They might hear it as a lack of warmth or even rudeness.
Right. They hear what's missing for them.
Exactly. So effective communication, therefore, it demands adaptation. You have to adjust your style to meet the listener's preferences. You need to create what Erikson calls a secure arena.
A secure arena.
Yeah, a space where true understanding can actually happen. Think about it like this. Your behavioral patterns are like a professional toolbox. You might have the perfect, most powerful wrench in there.
Okay.
But if the task at hand needs a gentle screwdriver, using that wrench is just going to strip the screw, right?
That makes things worse.
The fault isn't with the tool itself. The wrench is fine. It's about the choice you made in that context.
I think that shift in thinking from it's their fault for misunderstanding me to, hang on, maybe I failed to adapt my delivery, that's probably the most powerful personal takeaway from this whole system.
It's huge.
Okay, now let's talk about that internal world you mentioned. Where does our behavior actually come from? Why are we the way we are?
Well, our behavior is often defined as a function of personality and environment. It's this really fascinating mix of heredity, the genetic traits we inherit from parents, grandparents,
nature,
and our environment, which means the influential figures we kind of mirror growing up.
Yeah.
We start with spontaneous behavior, sure.
Yeah.
But pretty quickly we adapt to reflect the adults we look up to.
So it sounds like we have things that are relatively fixed, kind of set in stone, and other things that are much more fluid. Can you break down those key components for us?
Certainly. So first we have core values. These are the really deep-rooted fundamental lessons we learn, usually in childhood. Things like a strong belief in honesty or equality or maybe the value of hard work. These are like the bedrock of our character. They're extremely resistant to change. They really define who we are at our core.
Very hard to shift those.
Very hard. Then, in contrast, we have attitudes. Now, attitudes are more like opinions, and they're influenced by personal, often localized experiences. For example, a core value might be trust, generally. But if you've had a really bad experience with a specific industry, let's say used car sales.
Classic example.
Right? You might develop an attitude of distrust specifically toward all salespeople. Now, that attitude, unlike the core value of trust, can evolve if you have new, positive experiences that shift your opinion.
Okay, so attitudes are more malleable.
Much more. So if we get a bit technical for a second, the formula Erikson uses is behavior equals F, P-A-S-F, which just means behavior is a function of personality, your sixth core, and surrounding factors, your fluid environment and attitudes.
That makes the system feel less fatalistic somehow. It suggests that while our personality colors might define our default setting, our attitudes are actually trainable, adaptable. And that's key to interacting successfully with others, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's where the wiggle room is.
Which brings us right to the framework itself, the DISA system, or as most people know it, the colors.
Right. So we're dealing with 4 primary colors. Red, which stands for dominance, yellow for influence, green for stability, and blue for compliance, or sometimes conscientiousness.
Okay.
Now, it's really essential to remember, while we often discuss these pure colors just for descriptive clarity, this isn't about boxing people impermanently.
Good point.
Most individuals, something like 80%, actually exhibit a mix of 2 dominant colors. Only about 5%, a tiny fraction, truly present as a purely single-color profile.
Okay, hold on. If 80% of people are a mix of 2 colors, how useful is it really to talk about a pure red or a pure blue? Isn't that just creating a convenient stereotype that might actually lead to more misunderstanding?
That's an excellent and really critical question. The way to think about the pure color profiles is like they're the extreme poles on a map. They're the archetypes.
Okay. The ends of the spectrum.
Exactly. We discuss the pure red profile, not because most people are purely red, but because understanding the essence of red, The speed, the task focus, the drive for challenge that allows you to recognize that specific trait when it surfaces in someone who might be, say, a red-green blend.
Gotcha.
It gives you a language for that part of their behavior, even if that same person also displays green's need for harmony and stability. It's kind of like the difference between knowing the dictionary definition of anger versus knowing all the different subtle ways anger can actually be expressed by different people.
That clarifies things. So statistically speaking, which color tends to dominate in the general population? Which one do we see most often?
Green is definitely the most common behavior, often mixed with another color like yellow or maybe blue. The greens, the supporters, the stabilizers, they are really everywhere.
The glue, maybe?
In many ways, yes. Conversely, purely red behavior is the least common, which means if you are a predominantly red personality, you are likely constantly surprised, maybe even frustrated, by the pace and the priorities of the majority of people you interact with every day.
That makes sense. Now, stepping back, again, you mentioned this model isn't exactly new. Why are humans seemingly so obsessed with dividing personalities into, specifically, 4 groups?
It does raise an important question, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Why does this number 4 keep cropping up across different cultures and throughout history? We can trace this kind of structure way back to Hippocrates, over 2,000 years ago. He proposed the theory of the 4 humors.
Right, the humors. Yellow bile, black bile.
Exactly. And if you actually map his system onto the modern DISC model, the parallels are startlingly accurate. It's quite amazing.
How so?
Well, the choleric temperament, with Hippocrates linked to yellow bile, focusing on action and will, that maps almost perfectly to red.
Okay.
The sanguine temperament, governed by blood, focused on social connection and joy, that's clearly yellow.
Makes sense.
The phlegmatic temperament, influenced by phlegm, known for calmness and patience that aligns beautifully with green. And the melancholic temperament, dominated by black bile, focused on analysis, reflection, details, that's unmistakably blue.
Wow, the lines are really clear there.
They are. And the fact that this kind of 4-part categorization persists, you see it from ancient Greece, you even see echoes in things like the 4 elements in Aztec culture, it suggests a really deep-seated human need to categorize and maybe predict the somewhat limited ways we express ourselves behaviorally. Erikson essentially just modernized the vocabulary and gave us the practical application for today's world.
That historical context definitely gives the system more weight, more validity. Okay, let's get into the specifics now, starting with the 2 action-oriented profiles, red and yellow.
Right, let's start with red behavior. Bold, driven, and decisive. These are your highly ambitious, very task-oriented extroverts. They are the absolute definition of that choleric temperament we just mentioned. They thrive on competition. Honestly, they view nearly every interaction, every activity, as some kind of strategic move or a contest to be won. They have this intense focus, and they demand immediate results.
They often get labeled as just being power-hungry, don't they? Is that fair, or is it maybe a misunderstanding of what really drives them?
It's often a misunderstanding, I think. Look, they aren't typically motivated by power just for its own sake, like some kind of Bond villain.
Right.
But they absolutely seek decision-making autonomy. They need challenging tasks for growth, and most importantly, for results. They need control over the outcome. If a task is difficult, complex, maybe even seems impossible, that's exactly what draws them in.
The challenge itself.
Precisely. Think of leaders like Steve Jobs, maybe. The goal is the achievement, the win. Power is just the tool they use to remove obstacles and speed up the timeline.
And their communication style. It's pretty unmistakable, isn't it?
Oh, totally. It is entirely built for efficiency. Their speech is often blunt, very honest, incredibly direct. It often lacks the social niceties or preamble that other types might expect or prefer.
Yeah, no small talk.
Very little. They tend to speak loudly and quickly because, in their mind, time is being wasted otherwise. Their body language is equally powerful. Very direct eye contact, often leaning forward, maybe a powerful, controlling handshake. This behavior can definitely be intimidating.
For sure.
But for them, it's purely functional. It serves the goal of getting things done.
So what kind of stress factors really derail a red? What pushes their buttons?
Anything that slows down the result. Anything. They get easily stressed by a lack of visible progress, by mundane or repetitive routines, and especially by the perceived wasteful use of time.
Like a meeting going nowhere.
Oh, sitting in a meeting that just goes in circles. Absolute torture for a red. They also really hate losing control of the process. If you want to truly stress out a red, micromanage them. Insist they follow every single minor protocol you've set out, even if it slows things down.
Okay, noted. Now, here's where it gets really interesting, I think. How on earth do you give negative feedback to someone like that? To a red. They're so driven, so results-focused. They'll probably take any criticism as an immediate challenge to their competence, maybe even their authority.
You absolutely have to approach a red using the exact methodology they respect and use themselves. First, be incredibly well prepared.
Okay, homework first.
Definitely. This conversation has to be about facts, about data, and about the measurable negative impact of their actions on the bottom line, on the results. Never, ever focus on their feelings or attack their personality traits.
Give me an example.
Okay, so instead of saying you're being rude to the team, which is about personality,
Right, accusatory.
you say something like, look, the team's productivity dropped 15% last month because 3 members reported feeling demotivated by the speed and tone of the project critiques. See, facts impact, results.
Much more objective.
Exactly. Then deliver the feedback quickly and professionally. No beating around the bush. And be ready for them to push back, probably immediately, with logical counterarguments.
Oh, yeah, they'll defend their position.
Absolutely. And you must remain totally calm. Keep recentering the conversation on the agreed-upon facts, the data. Finally, when you're discussing solutions, Reds must believe they're choosing the path forward. You can frame your desired change as a challenge for them to solve.
Like, how can you fix this?
Precisely. What results-focused action can you implement next week to mitigate this 15% drop? And this is crucial. You absolutely must demand they repeat back the action plan they've agreed to.
To ensure clarity and accountability?
Yes, because they actually respect that kind of efficiency and directness. It shows you're serious about the result, just like they are.
Okay, that really shifts the dynamic. It goes from being a personal attack to more of a professional problem-solving exercise. Very useful. Let's move to the other action-oriented color now, yellow behavior. Optimistic, social, and enthusiastic.
Yes, the sanguine personality. Yellows. They tend to view life primarily as enjoyment, connection, and opportunity. They are the ultimate relationship builders. They often thrive in roles that involve things like sales, entertainment, public speaking, anywhere they can connect and inspire.
Right. Think of people like Oprah Winfrey, maybe, or a really high-energy salesperson.
Exactly those types. Their energy is often described as contagious optimism, and it really is.
It feels genuine.
It usually is. Their optimism can seem unbounded. They naturally focus on possibilities, on solutions, rather than dwelling on problems or obstacles. They excel in persuasion, but not necessarily through dry facts or logic.
More through feeling.
Yes, through vivid imagery, passionate body language, and just sheer enthusiasm. They're often quick decision makers, though admittedly driven more by gut feeling and excitement than by slow, methodical thought. They absolutely love being the center of attention, and, well, they can talk for hours.
Huh. We all know one. Okay, so what specific situations really stress out a yellow person? What makes them unravel?
Isolation. That is the absolute worst stress factor for a yellow. Being ignored, feeling invisible, or being physically isolated from the group, it's crippling for them.
They need people.
Desperately.
Yeah.
They also really despise rigid structures, bureaucratic processes, endless rules, anything that stifles their spontaneity. And excessive planning requirements. Forget it.
Too boring.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Furthermore, they really dread public humiliation or feeling like they've let down their friends or colleagues. They have a deep need to be liked, even loved. So negativity, persistent skepticism, or constant bickering just completely disrupts their entire emotional flow.
You know, if we connect this to the bigger picture, this is probably why managing teams with strong yellows can be tricky. You absolutely need their creativity and energy.
Definitely.
But you maybe can't always trust them to manage all the boring details or stick rigidly to the schedule.
That's a very common challenge, yes. Balancing their strengths with their less detail-oriented nature.
You describe yellows as valuing connection above almost everything else. So when they do get angry, how does that internal conflict play out, knowing they value harmony so much?
That's a fascinating point. What's really interesting here is their recovery time. You could compare them to, say, an everyday drinking glass.
Okay.
They might build up frustration a bit slower than a red, perhaps. But when they do finally spill over, the outbursts can be quite dramatic, loud, emotional, maybe even theatrical.
Big reaction.
Big reaction. However, that internal conflict kicks in immediately. The fact that they just potentially damaged a relationship they value so highly causes instant powerful guilt. So they seek reconciliation extremely quickly, often within minutes. The relationship is almost always far more important to them than whatever issue caused the anger in the first place.
They want to fix it fast.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you have to deliver some corrective feedback to a yellow, how do you manage that potential volatility and their deep need for connection?
Right? It's delicate. You absolutely must frame the interaction as a friendly conversation, not a formal critique. Start by explicitly reaffirming your positive connection with them. Say something like, hey, we're friends here, and I really value our working relationship.
Set the stage.
Set that safe stage. Then you need to manage their tendency to go off on tangents. A loose agenda helps, maybe keeping the discussion fairly brief. Give concrete examples, yes, but frame the critique in terms of how it will improve their ability to connect with or inspire others.
Appeal to their core driver.
Exactly. If you could just tweak this presentation slightly, it would land even better with the client. Crucially, avoid overwhelming them with too much negative detail or overly critical language. They are very likely to agree quickly just to end the uncomfortable tension.
Right, to restore harmony.
Which means follow-up steps are absolutely mandatory. You need to verify later, maybe in a subsequent casual chat, that the action plan is actually moving forward. Because their initial commitment might have been more emotional than logistical.
That's a really delicate balance, isn't it? Using their love of connection almost to ensure accountability.
Clever. Okay, let's pivot now to the other pair. The stability-oriented profiles. Green and blue. We'll start with green behavior. Balanced, supportive, and harmonious.
Okay, the greens. These are the phlegmatic types we mentioned earlier. They're often the most stable, the most balanced presence in any group. They're typically excellent listeners, very calm, generally easygoing.
The nice ones.
Often perceived that way, yes. Their primary driver is the group's well-being and overall stability. It's almost always team before self for a green. They are the reliable workers, the empathetic friends, the people who provide that necessary predictability in a chaotic world.
And since you said they're the most common profile, they often sort of set the underlying pace or tone, right? What's the biggest challenge they face, especially in a really fast-moving, constantly changing environment?
Change. Simple as that. They struggle profoundly with change unless it is fully justified, introduced really incrementally, and explained very, very thoroughly.
They need the why. They absolutely need the why and the how, step by step.
Yeah.
They are fundamentally security-driven and prefer the status quo, what's known and safe. If you tried to implement some big new policy on a Monday morning without months of prior discussion and reassurance,
Yeah.
a green will resist it. Maybe not overtly, maybe passively, but they'll resist until they understand the implications for their security and the group's stability. And because they are so focused on maintaining harmony, on avoiding friction at all costs,
Right.
they are highly conflict avoidant, which means frustration, anger, disagreement. It often gets suppressed, it gets internalized, which can lead to hidden stress, anxiety, and eventually, potentially burnout.
That's tough. What does their communication typically look and sound like? How can you spot a green?
It's usually quite gentle, reflecting that internal state of seeking calm. They tend to use a softer, warmer voice, speak at a slower, more deliberate pace, and use minimal, small hand gestures.
Less demonstrative.
Much less. In a conversation, they might even physically lean backwards slightly, which signals a preference for a bit more personal space and a less intense approach. And because they internalize things so deeply, they tend to hold on to personal criticism the longest. Sometimes they can view even a small critique of their work as a deep personal failing.
Ouch. So what are the main stress triggers for greens? What really rattles their cage?
Anything that removes their sense of security. Unclear tasks, vague instructions, ambiguous demands, those are paralyzing for green. They hate loose ends, unfinished tasks that linger. Rapid, unexpected changes are obviously huge stressors. And, critically, internal disagreement or conflict within the team is deeply upsetting to them.
They want everyone to get along.
Absolutely. They're also usually the least comfortable being forced into the spotlight. They perceive that kind of attention as unnecessary and potentially dangerous. Now, this raises a really important question. How do you effectively address someone who actively avoids conflict and might internalize every single word you say as a devastating personal attack?
Yeah, giving feedback to a green sounds incredibly tricky. The approach must be meticulously designed to maximize psychological safety, right?
Absolutely paramount. The setting needs to be private, calm, and gentle. You must use concrete examples, focusing purely on the impact of the specific behavior on the group's harmony or stability, never, ever on their character or personality.
Example.
Instead of, you're too slow, try something like, When the report is delayed by 2 days, it means the rest of the team can't start their part, which destabilizes our project timeline. See, behavior, impact, group focus.
Okay. Keep it external.
Keep it external. And reassurance is completely non-negotiable. You have to explicitly state that you value them as a team member, that you appreciate their contributions, and that this conversation is purely about improving a process or a workflow, not criticizing them personally.
Lots of reassurance.
Lots. And since they resist change, any corrective action needs to be introduced as a tiny, manageable, safe-feeling step. You might only ask for one specific, measurable change for the next week, rather than demanding a complete overhaul of how they do things. Then, you follow up, gently but firmly, just to ensure accountability and offer support.
Okay. Sensitivity is key there. Now, finally, we turn to the profile that really manages that intense focus on quality and detail. Blue behavior.
Right. Since green gives us that structure and harmony, who handle the deep dive into quality, the meticulous checking, often at the expense of speed.
That would be the blues. The methodical introverts driven by that melancholic temperament we talked about. They are constantly in pursuit of perfection. They genuinely believe in the saying, if you don't have time to do it right the first time, when will you find time to do it over?
Perfectionists.
Exactly. They take quality incredibly seriously. They often have meticulous systems in place for organization, for tracking things, for ensuring accuracy. We see this kind of focus in figures like Bill Gates, maybe Albert Einstein, or even the fictional archetype of Mr. Spock from Star Trek. Logical, analytical. I have this mental image of a blue colleague patiently waiting at a deserted red light at 3 a.m. just because the rule book says you stop at red lights. Is that kind of accurate?
That is precisely accurate. That captures the essence beautifully. They are driven by rules, by established methodology, by verifiable facts, not by intuition, gut feelings, or what might be expedient in the moment.
Okay.
And their communication style directly reflects this internal drive. Minimal body movement, often a more closed or reserved posture, a subdued and controlled voice tone. They communicate at a slow, measured pace, choosing words carefully. They highly value written documentation and absolute accuracy above all else.
And they know their stuff.
Oh, they are often the most knowledgeable people in the room on a specific topic. But, and this is key, they typically won't volunteer information unless you prompt them with a specific factual question. They're not usually ones for speculative brainstorming.
Interesting. So what are the main challenges, then, of working closely with someone who is so meticulously focused on accuracy and process?
Well, their caution, while a strength in ensuring quality, is also their biggest interpersonal challenge. They often require complete certainty and a thorough risk assessment before they're willing to take action or commit to a plan.
Analysis paralysis.
It can definitely lead to that, yes.
Yeah.
Prolonged deliberation, or sometimes even inaction, which, as you can imagine, drives the action-oriented Reds absolutely crazy. Their meticulous nature and their habit of detailed over-analysis can also easily be perceived by others, especially the more freewheeling yellows, as being overly critical, pessimistic, or resistant to new ideas simply because they naturally point out every potential flaw or risk in a proposal.
They see the problems first.
They almost can't help it. It's how they process information to ensure quality. And their stress factors are pretty much the exact opposite of the Reds. Spontaneous decisions are terrifying for a blue.
No surprises.
Definitely no surprises. Risky situations, unexpected changes, and especially unfounded or emotionally charged criticism cause immediate stress. They cannot tolerate emotional overload or being asked to make significant decisions based purely on gut feeling or enthusiasm. They absolutely must have data.
Okay. So how do you successfully approach a blue, either with feedback or maybe pitching a new idea? If they're so driven by facts, your pitch presumably has to be flawless.
Preparation is absolutely everything when dealing with a blue. You must approach them demanding well-researched, specific insights. You need to have factual evidence ready to back up every single assertion you make.
Bring receipts.
Literally, if possible. Avoid all personal remarks, friendly banter, or emotional appeals. Stick exclusively to the data, the process, the methodology, the quality aspect.
All business.
Pretty much. Be prepared for detailed, precise, and potentially quite critical questions. Remember, a blue colleague isn't attacking you personally. They are stress testing the logical inconsistencies or potential risks in your proposal. Answer those questions factually, calmly, and thoroughly.
And when you agree.
When you do reach an agreement, it is absolutely best practice to get the agreed-upon process or decision down in writing. Clarity and documentation are key for them. You can also verify understanding by asking them to perhaps summarize the next steps just to ensure they haven't mentally flagged any reservations or ambiguities they were too reserved to mention verbally.
Okay, that's a very clear picture of the four types. So what does this all mean in practice? We know the colors, their motivations, their stress points, but, we live and work in teams, families, organizations that contain all four types mixed together. How do we make this knowledge actually practical day to day?
Right, and this brings us to the really crucial concept: team dynamics and adaptation. Recognizing the different colors in yourself and others is just the first step. Applying that knowledge effectively means understanding how these different types interact, how they mesh, and where the friction points are likely to be.
And the idea is that a good team actually needs all four.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
A truly well-functioning, balanced team requires the contributions of all four colors. They each play a vital role.
It sounds like each color almost has a natural, defined role in the life cycle of a successful project or initiative.
That's a great way to put it. Precisely. If you look at a typical project, for instance, yellows are often the initiators, the ones who generate the exciting creative ideas at the start.
The brainstormer.
Exactly. Reds are often the urgent drivers, the ones who make the tough decisions, push the project forward, and keep momentum going.
Get it done.
Greens handle the careful, steady implementation. They ensure team morale stays high, manage the process smoothly, and provide that essential stability throughout the execution phase.
The backbone.
And blues. Blues are the crucial quality assessors. They mitigate risks, check the details, verify accuracy, and ensure the final product meets the required standards before it goes out the door.
The final check.
Right. And if you think about it, without any one of those colors, the system tends to break down. Imagine a team of all yellows.
Lots of great ideas, nothing gets finished.
Probably. Or a team of all blues.
It's a perfect plan that never actually gets executed.
Quite possibly. You need the blend.
So are there natural harmonies then? And maybe more importantly, are there natural clashes or pairings that we should anticipate and be ready for?
Oh, absolutely. There are definitely natural harmonies. You often see it between the more introverted, slower-paced pair that's the blues and the greens. They tend to understand each other's need for thoughtful deliberation, process, and calmness. Similarly, the extroverted, fast-paced pair, the reds and the yellows, they often team up well initially. Both crave action, excitement, getting things moving, though they might eventually clash over whether the primary focus should be on the tasks and results, which is the red focus, or on the people and the experience, which is the yellow focus.
Interesting. So where does the greatest friction typically lie? Can you give us a couple of clear conflict scenarios that pop up frequently?
Yeah, the most common, classic, challenging pairing is often red and green.
Okay, the driven versus the steady.
Exactly. Imagine a red boss demanding immediate, rapid results on a complex task from a green team member who needs time to process and plan. The red's constant pressure, their speed, their intense focus only on the bottom line. It strips the green of their essential feelings of security and stability.
Which stresses the green out.
Immensely. It can lead to paralyzing stress, maybe passive resistance, missed deadlines, and the perception gap is huge. The red sees the green as slow, inefficient, maybe even lazy. The green sees the red as tyrannical, pushy, and careless about quality and people.
Total misunderstanding. What's another common clash?
Another classic friction point is yellow and blue.
Fun versus facts.
Pretty much. Picture a yellow colleague bursting with enthusiasm, pitching a high-level, emotionally driven idea using phrases like, "This is going to revolutionize the market. It's going to feel amazing."
Mm-hmm.
Pitching this to a very analytical blue colleague.
Oh, dear.
Yeah. The blue hears zero verifiable facts, no concrete methodology, no risk assessment whatsoever. All they hear is vague hype. So what did the blue do? They start meticulously tearing the proposal apart, fact by fact, searching for inconsistencies, pointing out every potential problem.
Which the yellow takes personally.
Of course. The yellow feels personally attacked, deflated, disheartened, that their brilliant, exciting vision wasn't immediately loved and embraced. The core conflict there is really between spontaneity and fun versus structure and facts.
Okay. So since we know we can't fundamentally change these core personality types in people, adaptation becomes the primary skill we need to develop, right? It sounds like it requires a good dose of emotional intelligence, or EI.
That's exactly it.
Recognizing that the conflict isn't usually about malice or someone being deliberately difficult. It's often just about mismatched behavioral styles.
Adaptation is really the only practical way forward in most situations. It means consciously adjusting your communication style, your approach, to meet the recipient more effectively on their terms. Doing that dramatically increases the likelihood that they'll actually absorb your message correctly the way you intended it.
Okay, let's quickly summarize those rules of engagement for adaptation just to really cement this for the listener. How do you adapt to each color?
Right. To succeed when dealing with a red, be incredibly efficient and professional. Get straight to the point. Stick strictly to the topic at hand. Focus only on bottom-line results and tangible outcomes. Cut out all unnecessary fluff and detail.
Got it. Quick and direct for red. What about yellow?
When dealing with a yellow, be warm, friendly, engage with their social nature first, show you like them. But keep the conversation on track, maybe using a clear, simple agenda. Simplify the details, focus on the exciting big picture, the possibilities, and reinforce that personal connection.
Friendly but focused for yellow. Green.
When dealing with a green, offer structured, clear plans and timelines, preferably well in advance. Respect their fundamental need for security and predictability. Avoid surprises at all costs. Encourage movement and change through small, incremental, safe-feeling steps. And ensure you are consistently gentle and sensitive, especially with any constructive feedback.
Patient and reassuring for green. And finally, blue.
And finally, when dealing with a blue, focus heavily on your preparation. Bring documented accuracy. Have factual evidence ready for everything you state. Engage in a logical, factual discussion. Provide details. Avoid personal anecdotes or strong emotional appeals entirely. Stick to the quality of the work, the process, the data.
Thorough and factual for blue.
Yeah.
Okay, wow, we've covered a tremendous amount of ground today. Reviewing the 4 color profiles, their core motivations, their stress triggers, and crucially, how to adapt our own communication style to interact with them more effectively. It really does feel like learning a whole new language.
It really is like learning a language. And if we kind of zoom out for a final thought, the core message here is this. Understanding personality types, using this color framework, it's a skill that requires consistent practice. It's not just something you read about once and magically master.
Right, you have to use it.
You need commitment and conscious application in real life. Observing behaviors around you, noticing patterns, actively testing your adaptation techniques.
And before we completely wrap up, we absolutely have to touch on self-awareness, don't we? It's one thing to categorize everyone else, but recognizing your own color's potential pitfalls, your own blind spots, that's really the true first step toward genuine improvement in how you interact with others.
That's absolutely essential. Couldn't agree more. If you recognize yourself as primarily a red, you need to become aware of when your natural efficiency tips over into being perceived as maybe demanding, impatient, or overly bossy. If you lean yellow, you have to consciously monitor your tendency towards maybe excessive talking, dominating conversations, or inadvertently losing track of crucial details because you're focused on the fun. Greens need to accept when their deep desire to please and avoid conflict leads to indecisiveness, procrastination, or passive conflict avoidance that actually harms the team in the long run.
Yeah.
And blues need to recognize when their valuable, meticulous nature translates into debilitating pessimism, analysis paralysis, or being unfairly critical of others' perfectly valid enthusiasm or initial ideas.
Knowing thyself. So the ultimate goal here isn't really to perfectly categorize every single person, especially since, as you said, most people are a mix anyway.
Right.
But rather to use this framework as a tool to increase our tolerance, maybe our empathy, and dramatically reduce that quick, easy judgment of others. So here's maybe the provocative thought for you, the listener, to mull over as we finish. The next time you find yourself thinking someone is just being an idiot, take a pause. Ask yourself, is it truly because of their fundamental faults and shortcomings? Or is it possible that you've simply failed in that moment to understand and adapt to the dynamics of their particular personality style?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? So go out and practice this. Start today. Observe the dynamics of the people around you. Notice the subtle cues, even in things like written communication. Is that email super short and direct, maybe red or blue? Or is it really friendly and casual? Perhaps yellow or green.
Look at body language, too.
Absolutely. Is their posture relaxed and open, or is it more closed off? Is their voice subdued and controlled, or loud and energetic? Begin to consciously apply this color code to real-life interactions. You might just find that the world around you suddenly becomes a whole lot clearer and maybe infinitely less frustrating.
That's today's breakdown. While this discussion cannot replace the book's full text, it can offer a glimpse into its teachings. I hope you found this discussion helpful, and I look forward to sharing more. Let me know what book next you want to discuss.